but it's not you. You can't get in trouble. They can't find you, your organization, your family. So you create a different you. That makes it difficult to have a real relationship. So the people you get close to are the people in your office who all really know you. And although I dated people at camp, I could never be me. Of course, my cover was always, I'm a civilian working for the Department of Defense as a translator or a journalist or anything but intelligence. Intelligence did not exist on base. Italy was a NATO ally. Even though they knew we were there, we worked with Italian intelligence. But Italy, at the end of World War II, went communist. Even though they joined NATO, the Communist Party was still very strong. Camp Darby was near Livorno, which is Leghorn. The mayor of Livorno was a communist. The Longshoremen's Union was communist. And the port of Leghorn was our NATO logistical command location. So it was a critical, that was why the base was there. It was a critical point for NATO and the US allies. But we also knew the communists had a strong presence there for that reason. So the intelligence group did not exist as far as the Italians knew we were there, because we worked with them on some cases. If an Italian national was involved in one of our cases, we couldn't do anything other than turn them over to an Italian.
Right.
Same thing if they caught an American, they couldn't do anything except turn them over to us.
Okay.
So they knew who we were, but nobody else did. So our relationships with, I had a girlfriend who I lost because I couldn't be me, and she couldn't understand some of the things I did. I'm glad you got this.
So how were you still able to stay in touch with their family? Or?
Oh yeah, that part's okay because you're still you. And your address is a APO, Army Post Office box. It wasn't your battalion. It wasn't your location. And my parents never knew what I did. I told my mother before I went in what I was going to do, but I never told her anything after that. A, they're not supposed to know. B, it's for their own safety. So she knew I was in Italy because I would send her gifts for Mother's Day and stuff. And we had relatives there that I eventually got to see. So she knew that, but she didn't know what I was doing.
Okay.
But I was able to send the letters home and stuff like
that. So you could still keep in contact.
Yes.
And what did you do when you were off duty? What did you do?
I enjoyed acting. And the base had a very good theater group. So I became very involved in it and acted, directed, did stage sets, and I did it in high school and college. And I even did it at Fort Holabird when we were waiting. So I did a lot of theater there, which was good because half of my office also acted, which made sense because to be another persona took some acting. So the better actor you are, the better your persona is. It's more believable. So I had very good friends there. And when I first went there, before I knew about the theater, I found out that a military base, which I had not been exposed to, has everything you would need. And on a walk one day, when I first got there, I found out they had a wood shop. And I always like working with my hands. And I'd never been in a wood shop that had everything. I mean, we had a handsaw at home and a hammer and nails, but that was about it. So when I went there, it was not busy at all. And he was so happy someone dropped in. It was an Italian national. And he said, do you want to make something? I said, I don't know. What do you suggest? He said, well, people, they make furniture, they make anything. I says, we just have a new apartment. Maybe I'll make a bookcase. He said, yeah. So I made a bookcase out of beautiful wood. I did things I never would have done because I never had the equipment. But this tie-in was so good. And the bookcase I made was fantastic. And then eventually I sold it to an officer who liked it so much.
Nice.
He paid me cash for it. But it was mostly the theater.
That's nice. So it sounded like you had a very good experience over
I did.
in Italy.
I did.
Not basic training, but Italy.
To a point, I had some problems, which is why I never went to OCS. I went through 2 commanding officers. The first one was an intelligence officer. He had been trained like we were. Mm-hmm. So he knew our job, and he respected us and knew what we could and could not do and what we should and should not do. But he got into a little personal trouble that I won't go into. So he had to leave. But it had nothing to do with the work. It had to do with his personal life and his family life. We were without commanding officer for 3 months until they found a replacement. They found a replacement who had no intelligence training at all. He had been passed over twice for war college. When you're passed over 3 times, your military career is dead. He was from Texas. He was Texan and a half Comanche. And he was 6'8", which is the size of that door. So when we heard they found a new one of the lieutenants pulled me aside. He said, the new major is arriving on such a date and he wants his office remodeled. And they knew I was an architect. I says, what do you want? He says, he wants a window in his office. I said, we're an intelligence group. We have no windows except in the break room. He says, no, he wants a window in his office. And he wants all the doors raised to 7 feet. And at the time, I didn't know he was 6'8". I said, that's ridiculous. That's a custom-made door. Where are we going to get a 7? He says, those, and he wants it by the time it comes. I said, okay. So I draw up plans, and I get the Italians. The Italians do all the work, but they're all processed and pre-checked, and they all had clearances and all that. So the little Italians come in on the day they're supposed to start, and I said, he wants a window there. And I give him the drawings and the Italian, and this is all in Italian. And he said, okay. And I said, I want the doors. Okay. He reaches into his overalls, gets a piece of chalk, and he says, show me where you want the window. I'm saying, it's on the drawing. He said, no, show me. I said, okay. So I get the measurement, I draw the chalk, and he tells his friend to start on, and he comes in with the sledgehammer and starts banging. No measurements. But I said, okay, this is a different world. And they did the same thing with the door. They ripped it off and they broke it down. So when the major shows up, he pulls us all together in the first day and he says, I know nothing about intelligence. You're going to tell me everything I need to know. Wow. And we're going, this is not going to be good. I mean, how do we do this? And then he says, I want to go with you on your trips downtown. Now we're all undercover. We all look Italian. Even we had some non-Italian, but they look Italian. We're all average height. Italians were not very big, 5'8" to 5'10". He's 6'8", which is that height. We're all in civilian clothes. All our clothes are custom made Italian. Our shoes are Italian. All our haircuts are longer. We could go into any, and we did, any riot, any mob, and no one ever spotted us because we looked Italian.
Right.
We didn't have Italian watches, cigarette lighters. We didn't even smoke American cigarettes. He says, I'm going with you. And he was always in the uniform. And we're saying, this is not going to work. He says, I want the first group that's going out to let me know. And everybody's saying, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be me. So one of them says, can you imagine going into a rally, a communist rally? You're in civilian clothes, and here's this guy, 6'8". They're going to be shooting him.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So finally, my senior, whenever the young guys are always teamed up with an older. So I, in my 20s, was teamed up with a guy in his 50s. So we had to go downtown and meet with the head of the Italian police. And there was no way around. It's set up on a regular basis because of his schedule. So Dino and I said, he's going to go with us. He said the first one. He says, okay, let's go. So we told the major, I said, we're going to go meet the Italian chief of police. Would you like to go with us? Oh, yes. So we pick him up. We have a driver. He's in his uniform, all the medals and the hat. We're in our civilian clothes. And we go meet the Italian chief of police. Culturally, like most cultures, you don't dive into business as soon as you enter the office. There's a little chit-chat, and in Italy there's a little drinking of coffee, maybe a drink, smoking a cigarette, you talk about family, and then you ease into the business. That's how it's done, and we all learn the culture. So Dino and I are sitting on either side of the major, and he's sitting there, and we're talking to the chief of police in Italian, since we're all proficient and linguists. And we're talking in Italian about his family and his wife's ceramic hobby and his daughter's this. And the major, after about 20 minutes, says, will you two idiots stop this BS and ask this idiot what he can do for us? The chief of police stands up and in perfect English says, this meeting is over, and walks out. And the major said, what happened? He said, don't you know almost every Italian speaks English? He says, then why were you talking to him in Italian? That's what we do. He said, well, what else are we going to do? He says, I said, we can't do anything with you. You're too tall, you're in military uniform, you're a target. He's going to tell every cop he knows that you insulted him. You won't be able to be on the street without getting a ticket or shot at. And we finally stopped him from going downtown by telling him that, which was true. Anyway, so he didn't like the idea that we got him in trouble. Quote, his quote. Another time he calls me in the office and he says, where do you go at night? I says, I'm active with the theater group. He says, don't you go downtown to bars? I said, no, I don't have that kind of money, and I don't like drinking in bars. He says, every person in my office has a bar tab that I can charge to. And this is a major, and we're not major ranks. I'm saying, why the hell would I pay for his bar tab? I says, I don't have a bar tab anywhere. He says, well, you should, so I can charge. I said, well, if I ever go downtown to one of the bars, I'll let you know, which I never did. So that did not endear me.
No.
You have an orange light rather than green.
It's charging.
Oh,
But I can still.
okay.
Okay, so, let's see. where
Oh,
are
so
we?
yes. After the tour, I was going home. The major came to me. He said, "You have, you're entitled to a promotion, but I'm not going to give it to you unless you re-up." And I knew, because of who he was, that was not going to be a good idea. If it was anybody else, I enjoyed the work. I loved it. If I didn't have a career and a promise of a job, I would have stayed it. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed what I did. So I said, I'm not going to re-up. I'm going home.
Okay.
And that's why I didn't go to OCS.
So what was your rank when you actually left?
Spec 4, Specialist 4th Class, which is an E4. The promotion would have been a sergeant, which he gave to my roommate.
Okay. So all total from when you were called up until you left, how many years was that?
3.
3 years. Okay, when did you get out? What day?
April of 61.
April 61,
And that's in your application.
okay. Okay, so when you went right back to New York, how did you get back to New York?
I went back on the Liberty ship. Liberty ship is a small boat across the North Atlantic in April, which is bad weather. That's the same period of time that did in the Titanic.
Oh, okay.
And the same route, practically. It was so rough. I come from a seafaring family. We had boats, so water doesn't affect me. It really got rough when we left. Everybody started getting seasick, to the point where the cook finally got seasick.
Oh,
And it was only about a handful of us in the cafeteria drinking coffee and whatever we could put together ourselves. But it was an interesting trip. We traveled, whenever we traveled, we had 2 sets of orders, military and civilian. Civilian if we wanted to go commercial or had to go commercial. Military, with military ID, you can go anywhere in the world almost free. And that's where I did all my traveling in Europe, was as a military, because I always had, you don't travel, you don't get vacation or holidays unless it's approved militarily.
right.
And to have that, you need a set of orders. So I got all over Europe for $1.50 to England, nothing to France. As long as there's a military boat, plane, or anything, you can get on it if there's room. As long as you have travel orders. And the same thing with the Liberty ship. I was traveling as an officer because that's how my orders are written. Because in civilian life, they give you a civilian rating equivalent of an officer. So you get the respect of a civilian, because most civilians go in as an officer,
Right.
captain or lieutenant, depending on their age. So I traveled home on a Liberty ship in a private cabin as an officer and landed in Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Oh, okay. So you're close to home when you
Yep.
got home. So how was the readjustment once you got home?
Not bad at all. Remember, I had a job waiting for me. So I didn't have that adjustment of, now what am I going to do? I can't use my military training, which I can't. I did serve in the reserves, but the reserves could not use my intelligence training. They don't have a category for it. So though I was registered for 6 years for reserves, I never had to serve in the reserve because they didn't have a category. And that was just when NAM was starting to bubble. So I could very easily have been called up if I had
Right.
another MOS.
So did you go, the reserves, you had to go once a month, or?
No,
You didn't even do that?
because they couldn't use me.
Oh, okay.
So as long as I registered, told them where I lived, kept them posted, and I was available and capable, I was okay until they discharged me from the reserves in, I think it was 66 or something like that.
Okay.
So I went back to work. But what had happened after working a year, because my father died suddenly, when I got home, I found out my mother really had not adjusted very well and was having a hard time living in New York where they met. And in the 50s, grieving was a little different. In those days, everyone thought you leave the grieving person alone.
Mm.
So all her friends, which were both my father and mother's friends, because they all were a group of people in the 20s and 30s, 1920s, 1930s, who hung out together and then got married together. They were all starting to have their civil anniversaries together, so they all kept together. All of a sudden, they all stopped. They stopped calling her. They stopped asking her to the parties, and she was isolated.
Mm.
Yet she still went to work, and there were all these memories. We were in the same house. She had the same commute. I was gone. My brother was working and rarely home. So when I got home, she said, "I want to move to California," where her only sister lived. And she said, "You and your brother can do whatever you want. You can stay in the house, or you can come." And I'm going, we can't let her go alone. So I decided I would go to California with her, as my brother did, for 1 year, get her settled, and then come back. Never happened. We went to California and I stayed for
Oh, you stayed in
30
California?
years.
And what made you come back to New York?
They recruited me for my position at the Stony Brook Hospital.
As a,
I'm an architect, so my specialty became healthcare. So I was the chief architect at Stony Brook Hospital, which was the same position I had at Stanford University Medical Center.
oh, interesting. Do you miss California?
Yeah, no, I didn't leave New York for a reason that I didn't like the weather. As a matter of fact, I really missed that job. I wish I could have kept that because I didn't find that type of job in California. I had to start basically all over again and building up a reputation. Plus the fact I lost 3 years in my career. And a lot of people don't realize that the veteran has the same problem that a lot of women have having a child. You're out of the workforce
Right.
and your contemporaries have moved on.
Yeah.
They're now all partners and everything else. So I came in again at the lower level and had to work my way up. But that was okay. It was not a problem.
Now, did you ever go back to school, use the GI Bill or anything?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
In California, I decided I wanted to get a master's or a PhD in architecture and teach. And I always enjoyed teaching. So when I went for the GI Bill, they said, you can't get an advanced degree in the profession you're proficient in. I'm saying, why? And they said, it's not written that way. I said, then what do I do? And they said, take something else. And I said, what? So they said, we'll test you. So they tested me. And it came out science, psychology, writing, and journalism. And they said, we'll pay for any of these. And I said, okay, psychology. Because then I had the vision of combining psychology and architecture, which at that time had not been done, and today has been done. So I got a degree in psychology under the GI Bill.
Okay.
and then ran out of money.
And that's your graduate degree?
But it was a bachelor's.
Oh, okay.
I was going to combine them, and then I ran out of money. And although I got an appointment to one of my professors, said, I'll take you in as an intern as you go for your advanced degree, and you can work for me. But I could not quit my job and work full-time for him as an intern.
Right.
So it didn't work out, so I had 2 bachelors.
Okay. So did you keep in touch with anybody you knew from the military?
I did. My older partner, plus the other men and their wives who were in the theater group. I kept contact with all of them throughout until they died, because they were all older. I know where my roommate was. We were, as a bachelor, we were not allowed to have our own apartments. That was the commanding officer's idea. So there were 2 of us who went to intelligence training school, and we were told we had to have an apartment together. So I kept in touch with him a little bit, but I've never seen him. We Christmas cards, and that's about it. Later on, you have a question, I joined 2 veterans groups.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah. There are 2 groups that I found when I came back to New York. I didn't know about them in California. That I joined. One is the National Counterintelligence Corps Association, which is NCICA, which I am now the chapter treasurer, and we meet quarterly in New York for lunch and compare war stories. And we have people from World War II to recently in the recent Middle East. And I also belong to the ACICV, Army Counterintelligence Corps Veterans, where I was national president in 2014-15.
Wow.
And I'm a member of the American Legion.
Okay. So how did your service affect the way you relate to other people?
It made me more suspicious.
Suspicious.
As an agent, you don't trust anyone, and it's a good thing. You also become a lot more aware of things because your life depends on it. So this see things, say something is something we were trained in. We also learned to profile, not in a bad way that we pick out somebody, but you notice people who don't fit in.
Right.
We would have noticed that major who was 6'8" in uniform in a crowd of Italians who are all 5'8". It's that type of profiling. He doesn't fit. There's nothing wrong with it, but that's something you would watch. And I was able to break some cases because observing things that didn't quite fit. I didn't believe, nor did I trust that could happen, or he or she could do that.
Okay. Did you learn any kind of life lessons from the military?
I learned that the upper echelons of the military are mostly idiots. The people in the field who are actually doing the work, the agents, the grunts, the guys behind the weapons, really know their stuff. They're well trained. I would trust any one of them with my life, and have. But because of some of the reports I wrote on some of the cases I was involved, the reaction I got from Washington, from people who read the reports, showed me that And these are not elected officials. These are paid, supposed. Some of them probably couldn't find their butt with both ends. Otherwise, some of the reports that came back as unjustified, unverified, would have gone further. And I see that today when we hear some of the reports from the FBI and the CIA and some of the other agencies. It's not someone casting aspersions. I really believe they're screwing up because they've been doing it for years. They just have the ability to cover up a lot of this. And I think that's what caused some of the things like Benghazi and some of these other problems. We have the wrong people making some of these decisions. They should have some of the people who are really out there doing it.
Yeah. What message would you like to leave to future generations who view this, since it's going to be in the archives?
I personally believe every man and woman should serve in the military. I strongly support the Israeli aspect. Not only because we need them trained in national defense, but it's good character building. It's good discipline. I think our current generation is very soft. I think if we really had a military problem, the young people would be the last ones I would trust to defend me or my community.
Wow.
I think service is a good experience. It also is a good place to get your head on straight if you're not quite sure you want to go to college yet. 2 years in the military can't hurt you. It can make you a better person and give you focus. So I'm all for everyone serving and everyone who can to do it. Even those who can't, there are a lot of jobs that can be done that you don't have to be physically fit and be able to climb a brick wall with bare hands.
Right. So, in conclusion, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
Only one, and it's a cause of mine. I believe there should be a medal for the Cold War veterans. Every other battle has a ribbon that, or a medal that reflects their service. There is none for the Cold War. It would be an easy thing to develop, but it's something. Those of us who served in the Cold War were as threatened of life as someone shooting at us or planting a landmine. It was a different type of threat. Any one of us could have been killed in 100 different ways. Not necessarily on a landmine, but you read about all sorts of deaths. And we all put ourselves... combat soldiers know they're facing danger because they're in a combat zone. An intelligence person never knows. You never know where it's going to come from, who it's going to come from. So you're as nervous as a cat because you don't have a clear picture of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that should be rewarded, if nothing else, by a medal telling other people that that's how you served. A lot of people still don't understand what military intelligence does. We can't explain a lot of it, so they don't know. But having more of information like the medal with a story behind it on why it's necessary, I think would help that.
Did you ever try to advance that sometime?
Yeah, I've worked with someone in Zetlin and a couple of others. Someone tried a few years ago, and I've got the entire history, but the opponents scuttled it by telling everyone Well, if everyone in the Cold War got a medal, it would cost something like $474 billion. I don't know how that number can come up when I can get a medal from some catalog for $5.25. So someone needs to disarm that, and I don't know how to do that. So I keep in touch with Zetland, who is a veteran, who was in favor until he hit this brick wall. He doesn't know how to get over that. The opponent say 500. How do I counteract that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's stopping it.
Okay.
But I also don't think everyone who served in the Cold War, like the analysts who are in an office, which were half of us, I don't think they deserve that medal. I think those who were out there putting their lives on the line in a riot or a rally or infiltrating or doing stuff like, they're the ones that should get the medal, just like any other combat soldier. Just because you were a clerk at Fort Dix Chapel doesn't mean you earned a medal.
Right. Okay.
So I think that's one way to cut the cost down, but I haven't given that up.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was
Thank
very
you.
interesting.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you for your time.
How about that story about my basic training? Do you want a copy?
Oh, let me shut this off.